Okay, so here's the login page, and hopefully you guys can all see my screen. This is all web-based. I've tested it in Google Chrome, Microsoft Internet Explorer, Safari for Mac, and Firefox. So hopefully if you're using one of those, you should be good to go. If you're using a different web browser, it should still work, but I haven't tested anything beyond those ones. So the username for the login will be your email address, and I will provide a password when I send out the login information. It will be unique to each individual user, and if you want to change it to something more specific or something you remember, let me know. I'd be happy to reset it for you. Right now, I'm kind of the gatekeeper for all the login information. There is no password reset option through the system, so if you need a password reset, you'll just need to let me know. We're going to be working on updating that later on, but we wanted to get the system rolling with what we had without worrying about some of those extra features that I can support for the time being. So for this presentation, I have kind of a dummy group, a test group that I've created. We'll do all of the work within that and should be able to give you most of what you'll need in terms of seeing how the process works. And I will send out a high-level walkthrough of all these pieces when I send out the login information, which I'll be working on when I get back to my desk this afternoon. So you should have it by end of business today and should be able to log in and check it out and make sure everything works for you either this afternoon or Monday morning. So bear with me a second while I log in.
Going to lunch? Okay, I'll wait for you.
So you'll see this disclaimer every time you log in. I'm going to ask that you read through it all the way once on your first time, just so you've done it. It's kind of like an end user license agreement where you click through it and you accept it because you know it's part of the process. I get it. But I do want everybody to read through it at least once, please. This disclaimer is our way of emphasizing to our groups that the changes they make in the employer portal are theirs. So if you...
An anonymous participant has joined the conference.
Wrong effective date, you know, that's something we can help you fix, but...
An anonymous participant has joined the conference.
...for entry. Because the system ties into, this system ties into our billing system as well, paying as billed will be a requirement. And again, if you make a mistake when you enroll somebody, we can help you fix it, but please don't self-adjust the bill because of something that wasn't PPM's entry. If there's extenuating circumstances, obviously, please let me know. If we've got the wrong rates in there, if you're a 6-employee group and 4 people are wrong and it's a huge payroll problem, we can work with it. But for the most part, the emphasis here is going to be pay as billed, because if something's wrong, sound kind of mean, but you entered it that way, so that's how we're going to proceed. Sorry. Tyler says it much more eloquently than I do, but that's the point we're trying to get across. If there's anything you can't figure out how to fix, please let us know. I'd be happy to help. My team, Darla and Cheryl, who a lot of you have worked with as well, are all trained in this portal and would be willing to fix it for you if you can't figure it out, or walk you through so you can learn. Please also note here that companies that have access to the employer portal will be required to participate if selected for a payroll audit. This is actually in the joiner agreement already, but we wanted to remind end users of this system that we may need to do a complete audit since we won't actually be processing your requests anymore for your group. We'll go ahead and accept. This site is usually very quick. If you open it up, log in, and you leave it alone for half an hour, it's going to take a little bit of time to reconnect.
Are you going to be here for a while today?
That secure connection.
Okay.
So please be patient with it. If you
we'll deal with it Monday.
Have left it alone, went to lunch, come back, that sort of thing. So what we got here is the employer portal homepage. There are quite a few sections on this page. Some of them you're going to be using far more than others. You'll see the name of your company and the information such as the address, the trust contact, broker of record, and account manager. If you are directly insured with TPM and don't have an agency that you're working with, you won't see any additional information there. But for the purpose of this explanation, I just wanted to show what it would look like for a full setup. We've been working on updating all of our groups within the system with this information. So if you notice anything out of date, please let us know. You do have access to change it, but we ask that you notify us as well. That way we can make sure the association team and all of our downstream partners get an update as well. So the first section here is the current billing information. You're going to see the number of active employee accounts. This number will change as you add or terminate employees. So as we go through things here today, you may see that number go up or down. The current billing amount may not always match the invoice, and that's because the invoice represents a specific time when we pull the billing data. But it should be pretty close and should give you an idea of what your next invoice is going to be. The plan year section, this is going to typically show your previous and current plan years. Depending upon how long you've been with TPM and how close you are to your renewal, you may see more or less information in this section. And what I mean by that is you may see last year's plan in there as well, and if you're getting close to renewal, you may see the next year in there. It's going to be kind of hit and miss depending, again, on when you renew. The products section here, it lists the currently available benefits. So depending upon your group, you may only see one option in this section, or possibly many more if you have a base and upgrade plan option, as well as multiple billing locations. You can click to view the rates by tier for each product, and we'll do that real quick just as an example. You're probably all familiar with the TPM admin fee. It's a flat $11 for groups that haven't renewed for 2020, $11.50 for those that have. Always employee-only tier. Here you can see, and these rates are probably much more flat than what you're used to seeing on your invoice, but for example purposes here, we've got all the tiers, the actual rate that you're going to see in that line on the invoice, and then the commission amount specific to that coverage. See the same thing here for dental. You got employer life in here, STD. This group has all the coverages. You may not have this many with us, so your screen may have far fewer things. But you'll see commission amounts, like I said, as well. Within the portal, and I should mention this now, you can always go forward or back. It's not going to cause a form reset or anything like that. You should also see a back button at the bottom of pretty much any page. But you are able to click the back button in your browser or the actual button on the screen. So the classes section, which is below products, this shows the class names used for your group. Again, depending upon your group, there may be one here, there may be many. These class codes actually correspond with the division code that you'll see on your monthly invoice detail. So some of our groups are just going to be active. You'll see ACTV. Some groups have base and upgrade. Some of you have, 4 different locations and 2 different plans, so you may get 8 different sections. And then to add to that, we also have COBRA here, which is going to be the COB coding. If your company is large enough to offer COBRA, you will see these classes displayed. Some groups who have a third-party COBRA administrator may see SAC, S-A-C, for self-administered COBRA. That's an indicator for us that we don't handle your COBRA, but you may still see enrollments within these classes because all of this information gets sent over to Primera and VSP and Delta Dental and all of our vendors. The active accounts section displays the group employees. A couple things I want to note on this section. Active accounts is a bit misleading because it does show all accounts. Also, the the term account itself is what we use in the system to designate an employee. So if you hear me say account, I'm talking about an employee. We'll be adding an indicator in this area that has either active or terminated listed. That way it's easier to see at a glance if somebody has been enrolled. Also, that way, if you see why is that person still listed, I termed him last week, well, you'll see terminated there. That is coming. It's one of our next changes we're going to be working on with our system administrator on. The search box is pretty convenient. A lot of our groups are pretty large. This test group here has 12, 13 people in it, so you could scroll through and just look at who's enrolled. But for larger groups, this search box is pretty helpful. It'll actually start eliminating non-matches as you enter characters. So you can search by social security number, you can search by first name, last name, or even a partial match. So for example here, if we just start typing in somebody's social, 2, 3, so it's whittling people down as we go. We'll take a quick look at an actual employee account. You guys can see what that looks like as well. So on the account details screen, you'll see the employee information at the top. The participants tab here, I'm trying to get all this on the screen, will show the employee and any dependents enrolled. You'll see the term participant occasionally as well, and that means a person that's enrolled in the system. The beneficiary tab will show the beneficiary or beneficiaries. This is actually a new addition to our system within the last 2 weeks, I believe. So most existing employees in the system will not have anything loaded here. It's not a required field, but we do suggest that the beneficiary information is added when a new account is created. This will help TPM and your company in the event of a life claim. Just a quick reference, if we can get all the beneficiaries in there, just one less place to look for information. There are currently some fields when you're entering a beneficiary that are required. We're working with our system administrator to open these up because we know a lot of beneficiary information is not available. And Joe's going to have his aunt as his beneficiary because he's got no kids. He's not going to know his aunt's social security number when he goes to enroll for benefits.
You forgot something?
So we'll see how that plays out.
I'm just on
I'll provide more information on that at a later date. The last elections tab here will provide a summary of, let's see if we can get it all on the screen. There we go.
What do you got?
Of who's enrolled in what plan. There's also a price breakdown for quick view. And again, this should be pretty close to what you see on an invoice in terms
what
of
am I looking at?
medical amount,
or?
vision amount, and then commission. Excuse me. The All Accounts Enrollment tab is not actually currently used
for one of the Westgate H2A workers or one of your guys?
It is displayed. And the last
Manuel, just 1 second to get
last Build Info tab will show a summary of billing events for the account. The formatting in this is going to be updated.
This is why I haven't built anything yet. You haven't been around to let me know if the payroll is right or not.
Go through and take a look at each individual piece. So it's not very
Doesn't it look good? Okay, let me look at...
I'm not sure who's talking, but we are getting a little bit of side conversation. And I know we got a lot of people on the call, so if we can mute the microphones, that would be great. Thank you. So we're going to do a quick explanation of what you can change. A lot of people are going to need address changes, especially with the 1095B forms that were mailed out this week. If we have a bad address for an employee, the return address on the 1095B is going to be the employer. So we'll have a lot of address updates coming back, and we know that. And that's one of the most common reasons you'll go into an account, probably, is to actually change the address. So for the sake of this one, we're just going to change this employee's zip code, click Save. You aren't able to update the Social Security number. The reason for that is because the Social Security number ties into so many different pieces. It's a key identifier for each account that you'll actually need to contact TPM for that because we have a special process we need to do it. So let me know, or Darla know, or Cheryl know if there's a problem with the Social Security number on an employee. We'll help you out with that. But otherwise, you can change name, change date of birth, and address through here. You could even change gender if somebody got enrolled incorrectly. It is still binary, despite all the changes going on in the real world. The insurance world is ones and zeros. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the actual process of adding, changing, and terminating employees and accounts. Whenever you're in an individual account or an employee, you can always click on the home button at the top, and that'll take you back to the employer homepage. And then we'll scroll down here to active accounts. As a best practice when adding a new account, you should search in the active account search field right here for both the social security number and last name of the employee. I know most of you are going to know when an employee is being rehired, but I wouldn't want you to go through all of the data entry only to find out that when you click save that, hey, that social security number already exists in the account, and then you've spent time doing something that you probably are going to want back because, well, some of you have a lot of people to enter. So we're going to try entering somebody here, and again, this is pretty straightforward. I have a little bit of a walkthrough in the high level. If anybody needs me to go over it again, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to do a one-on-one. So we're going to start here by searching last name, and I can't type today, and no on the last name, and then we're going to search the social just to make sure, because we do get some last name changes, and sometimes we've got hyphens or two surnames, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that process. So 01304. All right, so we've done our spot check here. This person's not enrolled. We're going to click on Add New Account. This is going to redirect you to the entry page, which has multiple fields for the employee demographic information. About half of these are actually required. So if you don't put a value in there, or you put 8 digits instead of 9 for a social, or 10 instead of 9 for a social, you're going to get an error message. The high-level piece that I was going to send out, it does actually have all the required fields circled on there, so you can keep that for reference. So bear with me just a second here as hey, Tara's autofill's on. As I enter an employee, at TPM, we use all caps for first and last and addresses, just to keep things a little bit more uniform. If that's not your preference, these are your people, you can use proper capitalization. It's up to you. We're going to continue to use all caps just so things look a little bit more uniform on reporting and on the invoices. So you can tab through these fields if you wish. You can also click, whatever your preference is. I should mention when you're entering a date into the system, it does not require that you enter all 8 characters, meaning you could do 7 for July instead of 07, but you will need to put the slashes in. That's something we're going to play with formatting down the road, but for now, entering a date like that is acceptable. You'll see it automatically converts it to that. You could enter it that way as well, whatever your preference is. We do ask if you can get the email for your employee to please do so. Some of you may be aware that we are going to be partnering with 98.6 for telemedicine and telehealth services. A lot of their reaching out and marketing is going to be done electronically. So if we can get emails for employees, it'll really help us get out to those people and get information to them so they can enroll in the service and actually benefit quite a bit from it. More information will be coming on that, but emails are going to be the most direct way to reach a lot of the employees. So if you can get it, great. It's not a required field. Address obviously is required. We need to be able to send things to the employee. Address 2, we don't typically use it. If someone has a very unique address, you need both fields, feel free. I suppose it doesn't really matter if I'm perfectly accurate here. But, phone number, again, is not required, but this is one of the main ways that Premera can reach out to an employee. And I mention that because I've had a couple situations where somebody needs care management or is could use care management services for their diabetes or their heart condition, and there's no phone number on file. So Premera has to contact me, I have to contact you, we have to contact the employee. So if you can grab that information, it'll save everybody a lot of time, but again, it's not a required field. Social Security number is a required field, so we're going to make sure that we put this in no dashes and 9 digits. If you don't put it in 9 digits, you will get an error message. If you put it in with dashes, you will get an error message. It should not completely reset the form, but then you're going to have to go back and retype it. Excuse me. I do want to emphasize here that with the class, you may or may not see multiple options here. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Different companies will have 1, some will have 8. The plans that are available and the rates that correspond with them will be dictated by this election here. So if this person's going to be on the upgrade plan and you don't want to accidentally enroll them in the base option, click upgrade. And this is fixable if you accidentally put somebody in the wrong class, but it's going to make the rest of the enrollment process much simpler if you pick the appropriate class here. Hire date is a required field, and I'm sure you're all familiar with us coming back to you saying, hey, thanks for the form, please provide the hire date for us. It's a key indicator in terms of when somebody should actually be effective based on the waiting periods that you guys have or your company has elected in the joiner agreement. And we'll also mention that this system does not currently restrict how far back you can go in terms of an enrollment. As you all know, we have a 60-day limitation for enrollments and terms and changes for TPM. If we, in our auditing process, see that there's something that exceeds our timeframes, we're going to let you know. We're going to figure out what went on. We'll help everybody get on the same page and get it fixed. You'll also see here that the enrollment date is going to automatically populate with today's date. You don't need to do anything with that. It's just a tracking piece that actually maybe ends up being hidden down the road. Excuse me. So we'll put this person's effective date in. Again, like I said, it's a little outside of the normal time frame. But for the sake of this example, we're going to plug them in there. Reason for enrollment. Right now, this is a new field as well. We're testing it out. There's only three reasons in here: new employee, loss of other coverage, and open enrollment. We're going to expand upon that. This will help us for when we're doing our auditing. If you put a hire date in that's 6 years ago and they're just now becoming effective, we're going to ask you why, because it's outside of the normal time frame. We'll have some reasons in here, so maybe we can see, oh, he was a temporary worker that became full-time. Then we're probably not going to have to ask that question of you. Right now, if it's not a loss of other coverage or open enrollment, please just keep it with new. Like I said earlier, we're going to be adding a few things to our drop-downs and expanding options so that we can smooth things out for everybody. Excuse me. So if the employee has no dependents, you can actually click Submit and Proceed to Enrollments at this point. And that'll take you to the next screen to actually select the coverages. If you click the blue Submit button, the account information you just entered will be saved, but you will have to take an extra step to go back in and attach the benefits. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but wanted to point out that it's not the end of the world if you click the blue button instead of the green button. So for this example, we're actually going to put in a dependent, just so you can kind of see what that looks like. Once again, please bear with me while I type all this in. Shouldn't take too long. It's a male, dependent. So Social Security number is not required for a dependent. We can move forward with the enrollment without it. If it is a spouse over the age of 45, there is a Medicare reporting requirement to have the social for that individual. Again, you can proceed with it. We're going to end up coming back to you and asking you for that social at a later date. So if you can get it upon entry for the dependent, it'll save everybody some time, but we understand that's not always practical. Just an example, we can skip it. Birth date is required for dependents, go figure. And I should point out, if there's multiple dependents, so spouse, 3 kids, 6 kids, however many people there are on the plan, you can actually just, after you've entered the first dependent, click Add Dependent, generate a new set of fields. You can do that, I believe, in up to 99 times is how it's set. Not that anybody needs to do that, but it is available for the larger families. Just keep clicking Add Dependent, type in the next person's information, and keep moving. So at this point, we're only going to enroll 1 dependent with this account. We'll submit and proceed to enrollments. Oh, that's right, I already created this person earlier. Bear with me a second here. So this is the error message right up here that you would get if you typed in a social security number that already existed for this employer. So in that case, we have the opportunity to enter a new social security number. Hope I'm not making anybody motion sick like William now, sorry. We're going to go back to the list. And I will do that again with a different social security number real quick just for the sake of this training. My apologies, please bear with me. This person was supposed to have been deleted completely from the system, and I did not get that process correctly. So okay, this is a screen you should see, so I apologize for that. So the edit enrollment screen, which is where we landed, is where the benefit elections are made. The box next to the plan name, right here, Medical Cedar, needs to be clicked, as well as the box next to the participant that is to be covered. So in this case, we're going to just kind of show you some non-common enrollment. Some of you guys will be able to do this. Some of them, everybody's going to match. So we're going to say that the employee, obviously the account owner, is taking medical and can add for his dependent. We're not going to add the dependent. We're not going to add the dependent, but the employee is selecting. Some coverages may be clicked by default depending upon how your group is set up. For companies that have a short-term disability policy, that's going to be automatically elected for every employee because that's just something that everybody gets. You'll also see that employer life will typically be elected. If it's available, the admin fee and the TPM paid life will always be elected. Please don't unclick these because we're just going to come and ask you why you unclicked them and then tell you they need to be clicked. And we do that as part of our auditing process. Some groups are going to have volume-based coverages that require input. Employer paid life options should actually have this set by default. And actually, I'll be reviewing why this one's not showing, but you may have to enter the volume for the product. Some of the volume-based coverages, such as our STD Plan 4 and our Life Plan 4, do require a volume calculation before the benefit is actually entered into this box right here. If your group has one of these plans, please reach out to TPM. We'd be happy to provide you a calculation worksheet that we use so that you can get the right information in there. Once you have checked that the appropriate benefits for the employee and their family are all set, we'll click the Submit and Back button. This is something I recommend because you can go and edit the coverages pretty easily, which we'll show you in just a moment, but it's probably worth your time just to scroll back up at the top, double check everything matches what the employee is electing for themselves or their family. We'll click Submit and Back to Account. And this is going to show you a summary basically of everything you just did. You've got your owner, the employee, their address, their class, effective date, hire date. For employees that are in the system already, you should see something here in the Premier ID section. We do that about on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We go through, we find new enrollees, and we'll upload the Premier ID number for you. So it'll be blank for new people. You may see a couple as you get into the system where we have been doing the administration that says new employee. But for the most part, you will see Premier ID number there. So just a quick show you what we did. We've got the 2 participants. We haven't added a beneficiary. Again, this is voluntary. You sure go in and do this. It's going to save everybody time in the long run. I'm not going to waste your time showing you that one right now because that's just the same fields we've already seen. You can see the coverage elections we just made. And there's not going to be anything in last billed info because this person hasn't been invoiced yet. So we're actually going to take the same account here and we're going to add a dependent. In this situation, we're going to be adding a newborn. And the reason I picked a newborn is because it's just a little bit different than adding another dependent because of how newborns are added and their date of birth. But this process will be pretty straightforward and you'll be able to see how to add a non-newborn dependent as well. So let me back up, apologize. So in the Participants tab, Add New Dependent, big green button. So we're going to put in first name, date of birth. So we're going to use something in the month of February just for this example. Something I didn't mention earlier, but now is a good time to say it. The address for a dependent is automatically going to assume the address of the employee. So you don't need to enter the address on a dependent. The exception to that would be if the dependent does have a different address. So kids off at college, kids that live with mom instead of dad, things like that. You'll want to actually go in and put their individual address in here if you have it. But again, it's not a problem if you skip it when the address for the dependent is the same as the employee. And this is newborn. We don't have their social yet. Pretty darn common. You'll see dependent is the default here. So with a newborn, the effective date is going to be the first of the month in which they're born. This is for a couple reasons. One, I'm sure most of you have seen it. We don't do our prorating, any prorating with the billing. It's end of month, beginning of month. That's just our process. If you don't put the effective date as the first of the month in which the child is born, you're actually not going to see them available for enrollment. If this wasn't a newborn, say it was we're adding a spouse, they got married 2/21, effective date would be first of the month following the qualifying life event. And I think you're all pretty familiar with that process from all the forms that have been sent in to us over the last few years. So we'll save that child. And now you'll see that we have another dependent on here. And now we need to enroll the dependent. So for that, we're going to go to Last Elections. And right now, we're not going to see that new dependent. So we're going to add and edit the elections. You'll want to enter in the changes effective from the actual date that we're going to be making the change. So since this child was born in February, we're going to do February 1st, 2020. And then you go down to Proceed to Edit. If you do put the wrong date into that field that we were just on, you may not be able to enroll the child or the spouse or any dependent because they may not display until their actual effective date. You'll notice that pretty quickly if you've got the wrong date in there because it'll cause problems when you go to save the enrollment or they won't display. So in this case, we're just going to add medical for the newborn. No reason to add dental or vision. Keep scrolling down. We're not making any other changes, so now we're going to submit and back to account. And then we go to last elections to review what we did. Sure enough, we have a second dependent on the account now. If this change results in a tier change for rating purposes, you would see a new amount over here. Well, and probably the corresponding commission if you have a broker. So it's a pretty good indicator if the change you made makes sense. You'll also see here that the effective date for the medical coverage was updated to February 1st. The changes that were, or the coverages, excuse me, that were not changed will still have the effective date on the plan. Don't worry, the other two people that were on the plan prior to, they didn't lose their coverage. It's not freshly effective 2/1. That's just a representation of when that tier was changed to from EC, employed child, to ECN, employed children. So we covered adding the dependent coverages. So removing a dependent from coverage is essentially the same process, but in reverse. You go to the last elections tab and click the add edit button. So let's say we added the child for the first month, but he's going to go on mom's plan, so he doesn't need to be covered on the medical plan anymore. So as of the 1st of March, he's going to move on to mom's plan. So for this one, the changes effective from would be March 1st because that is when he is going to be off of the plan. And we will go down to proceed to edit. Again, pretty much the same process we did before, but in reverse. This time, we can just unclick him. Should note that you don't have to get right into that little box. You can click anywhere on the line for the person. I asked for that specifically because I have trouble clicking on the little boxes when I'm doing multiple enrollments and I get frustrated. So I said, okay, can we make the whole line clickable? And they did. Sorry, little bird walk there. But so as you saw, I just clicked save on that. And now we're going to see that as of 3/1, Rex is no longer on the plan, and we're back to employee child, and just have the subscriber and one dependent. If you do ever need to see, hey, where's the history on this? Why is it showing the way it is? You can actually see it in the add edit election field here. You can see that as of the initial enrollment for this account, this top line here, it was employee child from 10/1 till 1/31. That's when we added Rex. We changed to ECN as of that date. And here we are as of 3/1, back down to the employee child. So you can see some history here. It will get confusing with families that do a lot of moving people around. But for the most part, you'll probably see either one continuous block or maybe one change per year for an employee. But there you are able to see the history here if you need to go back and try and figure out when somebody dropped, when somebody was added. Okay. So this process we did with the changing of elections for a dependent, same process making a change for an employee. Just as a reminder, please be aware that the same rules for adding coverage outside of open enrollment or newly eligible employees do still apply. Even though the system isn't going to lock you out from dropping vision and then adding it on the next month, if somebody is voluntarily dropping coverage mid-year, it's important to remind them and for everybody to remember that they're not eligible to re-enroll until open enrollment without a qualifying life event. So obviously, somebody loses coverage, loses eligibility, that's a different story. But if someone doesn't want to pay for vision anymore, they can't just come back the next month and say, I'd like to have it back. The system will let you do that, but again, that's outside of the policies and our process. I think all of you are aware of that anyway. Just wanted to reiterate it because the system will let you do it. So next we're actually going to take a look at terminating an employee. And you can click the home link that I mentioned earlier to go back to the group. And we'll go back down here to active accounts and do a quick little search for the employee we're going to term. You can click anywhere on this line as well as over here on view. I should mention that as well. They take you to the same place. So termination is actually probably the simplest process, which kind of makes sense because you're not entering any substantial data. You'll go into the account like we just did. We searched for Ben here. We found Ben. We're going to go in and click the orange terminate button right there at the top. So you'll enter the termination date, which is always going to be the last day of the month in which the employee was eligible. It'll automatically populate with the current month's last date. So please be aware of that. If it's a, oh shoot, forgot to term this person in January, you'll need to update this. Otherwise, it's just going to pick up the 29th for February. If you were to go and term somebody on Monday, you should see the end of March in there. From the qualifying event drop-down, you'll pick the reason for coverage termination. This list is going to be updated to include a few more non-COBRA events. For now, almost all of these are actually specific to COBRA qualifying events. If this is a situation, so we'll say in this case that Ben is deceased, then you'll go down to requested waiver of coverage, no COBRA event. And again, we're going to fine-tune this so that things make a little bit more sense and are more intuitive. But for now, if it's not a COBRA event, we'll do this one here down at the bottom, requested waiver of coverage. The qualifying event date itself is actually the last day that the person worked. You're probably familiar with this if you filled out a COBRA form before. There are two separate fields on there. So we're going to put it as this. You click the submit button, and this will return us to the account details page. And you'll see a termination date over here on this individual. And if you go into the account, all that information will still be there. So you can still see this person even though they're terminated. So as of the recording of this training, and I mention that because this is going to change, TPM still requires termination notices to be sent to our team. The reason is we're still testing the termination report to make sure it's accurately capturing all COBRA eligible terminations. And the reason we're being super thorough with this is because of the federal requirements that go into COBRA notifications. We want to be 100% confident that we aren't missing anything and that all the qualifying event pieces are pulling in for us. We'll notify you once that we no longer need you to send termination notices to us, COBRA qualifying event forms. But for the time being, we're going to ask that you still send it to us after you process a termination in the system. We just don't want to get ourselves in trouble or you in trouble for failure to notify somebody. But that'll be soon. That'll probably be by the end of next month that we are completely confident in that process, and we'll let you know, like I said. So those are the core features, truthfully. We added somebody, we added an account, I should say. We added a dependent to the account, we termed a dependent off the account, and we terminated an account. That should be 90 to 95% of the processes that you're going to end up doing. There are a couple things I want to mention, though, before we get to any questions. While you will no longer have to send in forms to TPM for most of what you do, we do still strongly recommend that you keep a physical record of elections, changes, terminations, and waivers in the employee's file. In the event of an audit or an employee contesting their enrollment or lack thereof, A signed document would be very helpful for everybody. There are also still going to be some situations that we will require forms to be sent in to TPM. Those are going to be some of the outliers, like medical support orders. There's a piece in there that the paperwork that we have to fill out as well as the plan administrator. And we also want to make sure that we know when there's a support order so we can notify our vendor partners. The other one that comes up occasionally is either a court order or adoption order. We need that paperwork submitted to us as well. That way we have it on file. There's, again, a few extra pieces that go into that. So also, again, as of the recording of this training, employer portal users are not able to process a rehired employee on their own. We're working with our system administrator to put a process in place so that you're able to do this. The reason it's not there now is because there's a lot of steps involved, so we're trying to streamline it. So perhaps there's a button that you can click rehire, and it'll walk you through everything instead of having to remember a 6-step process. So for the time being, if you do have a rehired employee, please contact us and we will unlock, so to speak, the employee's account so that you can enter their new hire date, their coverage elections, all of that. And the last major piece is that we're actually going to be doing a weekly audit of the entries made by the employer portal users. Excuse me. We will reach out to the company if we identify anything that doesn't look right. This will probably mostly be effective dates based on hire dates. That's the easiest thing for us to see. We're obviously not going to know if you spelled their name right, entered their social correctly, but that'll be one of the key things that we work on so that we can make sure that everybody is getting coverage when they're supposed to, so that an employee doesn't have to wait over 90 days, and so that everybody's in compliance. We also receive vendor questions when we send over our electronic file feed to them. We may reach out to you directly if there are questions on why something was done, or if changes are being made outside of their expected parameters. And with all this, I want to mention we're not looking to police everything you do in the system. But if we do see something that is outside of the TPM policies, we'll reach out and work with you to make sure we understand what's going on and make corrections as needed. And a couple other little housekeeping pieces. Some of you probably are already aware of this. Something you enter into the system by the 10th of the month will make the next month's billing. It actually goes out to about the 15th because this system is live. So if you were to plug somebody in on the 15th, they're probably going to be on next month's billing. But there is a cutoff point. So if you put somebody in on the 28th, don't expect them to be on the next month's bill. All of our data gets sent over overnight to our vendors, Monday night, Tuesday morning, Tuesday at 1 a.m. I believe it is, every week. So if you plug somebody in on Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., they're not going to transmit until the next week's file. So there is still some lag time in it, but it is cutting down entry from a 3-week turnaround, which is about what we currently have with forms, down to 1 to 1.5 weeks. So we'll see significant improvement in getting ID cards to people, providers being able to verify eligibility of that too. So there'll be some big gains even right out of the gate with this system. And I think a lot of groups have already seen that actually with open enrollment going through this. I did want to show, there's one other feature that I skipped accidentally. There's an invoices button, icon, link, whatever it is up here at the top. You won't see anything in this test group because this group hasn't actually been invoiced. But you will be able to see a summary here of the bills that have gone out. So I encourage you to take a look at this when you get your credentials. Just poke in there, take a look. This is not a finished product on this one. We don't have it available yet where you can actually click to download your current month invoice in a PDF format. That is coming. We are working on that because it'll make things easier for everybody. So as soon as the billing's been generated, you can log in, you can print it out, and you don't have to wait for it to show up from our billing administrator. So that'll be coming. There's also going to be an FAQ link added. Within that link, we hope to give some little 2-minute snippets of here's how you add an employee, here's how you term an employee, as well as putting in a TPM Trust FAQ that actually goes over where payments go to and what form to use although most of you won't need forms anymore. But we'll be improving this, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the year, adding more functionality, making it so that hopefully we can move from 90 to 95% of what you do to 98%, 99% of what you do through the portal without having to continuously scan and email things to us. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. We are